All right. So you are absolutely a legend since you are still here in this auditorium. You are ready to listen to the closing lecture, which I'm going to present. So the topic of my lecture is holistic approach to musculoskeletal healthy aging, meaning preserving the functionality of our musculoskeletal system till the latest stage of life. But the interesting part actually is what we're gonna look into through this lecture. So we're gonna take a look at the factors contributing to osteopenia, osteoarthritis as the main conditions that are compromising the musculoskeletal system performance. The importance of identification of different phenotypes, so we are more aware of what strategy we should use or we should choose in order to have the best effect from the therapy. Also, we'll take a look at lifestyle, dietary, exercise strategies for prevention of musculoskeletal conditions and some of the current stem cell and cell-based therapies available to do that. But the value of this topic actually is that following this lecture you will be able to understand how in general the protocols of regenerative medicine are built up and built on. Namely that when you have any kind of condition, so regenerative medicine would be effective if there is any deterioration happening. We've been talking all day through about regeneration of the tissues, right? And the idea, the concept is quite simple. But then when you are facing certain condition, as for example diabetes mellitus, in order to have success with the regenerative therapy, you have to list down those tissues that are affected by the condition. So you have to know what tissues to regenerate in order to have the improvement of the condition. So what kind of systems, what kind of tissues are we dealing with, are we addressing when we are trying to manage the elderly skeletal muscle performance? Obviously, those would be, first of all, muscle system and skeletal system. No rocket science in that. But on top of that, quite interestingly, nervous system plays a big role, even though it's maybe it's not obvious from the first glance. Nevertheless, we do know that our muscles are governed, of course, by our central nervous system. So if there are any impairments, and there are most of the time age-related impairments with the nervous system, so in order to have our musculoskeletal performance good and healthy, we also have to look into and address the nervous system. And even on top of that, we are also dealing with psychosocial factors. So psychosocial factors, let's even get rid of psychological factors, just the social factors. So these are some factors that are above, even above our tissue or our body, but even though they should be taken into account as well. So what kind of problems we can observe with the muscles or with the muscle formation during the aging? First and foremost, this is anabolic resistance. What anabolic resistance means is following back that concept of remodeling of the tissues. So all of our tissues get remodeled through our life. The old cells die, the new cells come to replace those. So during our young age, the protein that we eat has ability to generate, so we consume the protein, then this protein gets converted into the protein of our own tissues. So in young age, the protein that we consume builds up or ends up as a protein of our muscles, and these rates are higher than the muscle protein breakdown. Muscle protein synthesis is higher than the muscle protein breakdown. This is the death of old cells. This is the formation of new cells. So when we age, there is a tendency of no matter how much of protein is consumed, the rates of forming new cells from that consumed protein is lower, or is the same or even lower than the muscle protein breakdown, meaning that the new cells are not forming out of those nutrients that we consume. This is called anabolic resistance. Even though we have substances to build up to make anabolic processes going on, there is certain resistance that prevents doing that. Another one problem with muscle regeneration. So you know that we have muscle stem cells, or so-called satellite cells, that would come when we have any kind of injuries, but even physical stress, muscle performance always associated with the muscle fibers destruction, and reforming the new muscle fibers, or growing the muscle, is actually a result of having initial trauma of those fibers. And along with those satellite cells, the cells that we have are so-called fibroadipogenic progenitors, FAPs. So in normal scenario, during our young age, we have these FAPs affecting our satellite cells and effectively restoring the tissue. However, during the later stages of life, these FAPs, they exhibit pathological behavior that results with fibrosis, with instead of formation of new myotubes, we observe formation of connective tissue and formation of intra-articular adipocytes. And these intra-articular adipocytes ends up with the fact that muscle structures, they get saturated with the fat tissues. So extracellular matrix of the muscles, it's like fatty liver, but with the muscles. And there was a longitudinal 5 years study that has shown people, individuals from 70 to 75 years old, have about 30% of their volume of the mid-thigh muscle being exchanged for the fat tissue in women, and up to 50% in men. Another one thing is muscle fibers. So you know that we have 2 types of muscle fibers, 3, but mainly 2 types. One type is slow twitch, and type 2 is fast oxidative or fast glycolytic. So the slow twitch fibers, they are responsible for endurance type of activities. They are not as fast, and so the method of energy production they are using is by using oxygen. So it's aerobic production of the ATPs. So they're responsible for endurance type of activities. They are able to work for a long period of time. So fast oxidative or fast glycolytic type of fibers, they can produce ATP straight from the sugar. Even though it's not effective, they are responsible for more fatiguing or more fast type of activities. With the age, there is a tendency of our organism, of our muscles, to lose type 2 fast twitch fibers, and it is associated with difficulties such as getting up from the chair or lifting up some heavy weights. Also, we can observe muscle mass decrement, muscle atrophy, about 0.37% per year in women and 0.47% in men before the age of 75. After age of 75, of course, the rates are higher, up to 1% in men. And as a result, obviously, if there is no tissue, the function of the tissue gets decreased, deteriorated, and the function of muscles can be characterized or evaluated by the muscle strength. Muscle strength obviously also gets decreased with the age, which actually also correlates quite well with the hormonal changes. And interestingly enough, just even immobilization. So whenever you don't use the muscle degrades. Simple immobilization of 10 days usually results with 1 kg mass loss of the muscles. And to a certain extent, so there is a certain threshold after which of this muscle mass lose, after which people are getting institutionalized or somehow get some type of disability and need institutionalization. On top of that, so this are just the muscles. This is what happens to the muscles. What happens to our brain, to our central nervous system? So we can observe decrement of coordination, strength, and power with aging because, first of all, of decrement of the volume of premotor cortex, this part. After the age of 65, it's been found that most people, the volume decreases more than 40%. There are also changes in primary motor cortex, in occipital lobe, so we can observe weakness, increment of weakness, low activity, slowness, and also decrement of the gait speed. These are the morphological changes of the brain, but also there are neurological, or so more to be more precise, neurotransmitter differences in the aged brain. And those we have discussed already today pretty much thoroughly. So serotonergic, cholinergic, adrenergic, dopaminergic, GABAergic, glutamatergic. Very much of those were mentioned by Dr. Yuri during his presentation about depression. So it's the same realm, but not due to depression, due to the condition, just due to the aging. However, principles are all the same. Spinal properties. After the brain, the signal goes through the spinal cord and through the motor neurons. So these motor neurons, the axonal part of motor neurons, also get degraded during the age, especially with the decrement of second type fast twitch fibers. The motor neurons that were innervating those, they go through atrophy. So also the slow twitch fibers, motor neurons, are trying to resprout those axonal connections. As a result, this whole system also gets pretty much compromised. So just the physiological changes with the age that are connected with the loss of motor units, with the changes in fiber type, with muscle fiber type atrophy, with reduced neuromuscular activation leads to decreased velocity, force, and strength of our muscles, and in some cases can lead to institutionalization. On top of that, let's not forget that muscles are not just for movement. Muscles also perform metabolic functions. Let's not go into the deep. They perform also endocrine functions. Interestingly enough, muscles produce myostatin. This myostatin controls also lots of processes. We will touch that a little bit later, but one of those processes is osteoclast formation. And osteoclasts are those cells that perform resorption of the bone. So our bone health is also directly dependent on the healthy and normal functioning of our muscle tissue. Also, muscles perform metabolic functions. So they produce pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory adipokines, and it depends a lot. They can control production of pro-inflammatory adipokines. They excrete myokines, and it directly the healthy lifestyle depends on the healthy muscle tissue, because otherwise it would be like a phenotype of sedentary way of life or obesity. Levels of C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. These are also known as geriatric inflammatory markers. These are the markers that characterize the low-grade inflammation, chronic inflammation, and obviously it contributes to the frailty. There is even a vicious cycle of chronic inflammation and frailty. This is all about the muscles that we have, about 500 of symmetrical muscles. Going further to the bones, about 206 bones we have. We have discussed a little bit that, yeah, we have osteogenic cells that become mature into osteoblasts and become osteocytes that form the bone, and there are osteoclasts that resorb the bone. Those make possible the process of ongoing bone remodeling, and this process gets disrupted with the aging, and that results with thinning of the rods and plates, and having this pore volume much higher in comparison to younger age, so the bones get more brittle. Pathophysiology of aging in terms of bone tissue is decrement in osteoblasts that form the bone, increment of the activity of osteoclasts that resorb the bone, and then bone marrow fat. Same as in the muscles, we can observe infiltration of the fat tissue. Same as in liver, we can observe fatty liver disease. Pretty much similar by concept process happens to our bone tissue as well. Of course, we have decrement in bone mass, which is also correlated with the hormonal profile during the age. And gradually we are coming to the articular cartilage, to the joints, to arthritis. So this is the structure of healthy cartilage. We have non-calcified, calcified cartilage, subchondral plate, and subchondral trabecular bone. Those are different cells and substances that form the cartilage tissue, the cartilage structure. And this is what we can observe with the aging. What happens with the decrement of water proteoglycans, aggrecan, chondroitin sulfate, collagen, and increment in keratin sulfate and hyaluronan. So, taking all of these factors, such as aging changes affecting joint tissues, such as sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle mass, such as osteopenia or osteopenia, yeah, we can observe musculoskeletal aging, and in certain cases, especially with such factors as obesity, joint injury, genetic predisposition, or special cases of anatomy, we are facing such condition as osteoarthritis. Of course, there is genetic predisposition. We cannot really control it at the moment or edit at the moment. There is also a gender predisposition, gender factors, and we cannot control. But something that we can control is actually loading. So interestingly enough, that underloading of the cartilage as well as overloading of the cartilage leads to cartilage degeneration or cartilage destruction. So both like sedentary way of life or overstressing this cartilage tissue will result with cartilage destruction, degeneration to a certain level. So obesity is one of the examples. Obesity itself is a risk factor for particularly, for example, knee osteoarthritis. And in first step, first level, of course, it is overstress, overweight, overstress on the cartilage. Then in the later stages, as we remember, obesity has all those metabolic disorders and chronic systemic low-grade inflammation. So these inflammatory cytokines also contribute to the destruction of the cartilage tissue. And in our joints, with the aging, we can observe as cartilage degeneration as well as subchondral microdamage, subchondral platelet thickness getting decreased, porosity gets increased, subchondral trabecular deterioration. These are the signs of osteoarthritis, so bone cysts, thickening of the capsule, cartilage fibrillation, meniscal degeneration, osteophyte formation, subchondral bone thickening, bone marrow lesions. Some of the molecular alterations that can also characterize the osteoarthritis. The chondrocytes themselves, they start exhibiting so-called senescence-associated secretory phenotype, meaning the cells of the cartilage, they secrete, we can refer to as harmful harmful cytokines and chemokines that even further deteriorate the environment in the cartilage tissue. And of course, there are different phenotypes of osteoarthritis. We also have covered this topic today, meaning that some patients may need more anti-inflammatory therapy, so to say. Some patients would need to take a look into their metabolic problems, and that would be the best kind of strategy in those cases. But even though, different patients need a different approach, I think we can all agree on the fact that actually inflammation is either a sign of some processes going wrong, and as well it can be a cause of those processes going wrong. So if we focus on the inflammation, well, we can do pretty good in terms of not only musculoskeletal system, healthy aging and functionality, preserving the functionality, but also for many other organs and systems, that's neurological systems, cardiovascular systems, and everything else. So we are dealing and we are referring to the inflammation processes. And this is kind of a holistic approach. So it means that for some people, for some patients, just the simple dietary interventions can help with that inflammation, can fix that inflammation, can decrease the inflammation, can make them healthy with just with just good diet. So what is good diet? This is quite a simple and quite complex question at the same time. Many people asking, like, what's the best diet? And yes, there are certain schools or certain theories, like for example, Mediterranean diet, which is known for its very good effects. But at the same time, the example I always give, take people who live far north, like Chukchas, for example, that are eating whales and deers all their life for many generations, and they wouldn't benefit from Mediterranean diet. Same way it would be fair that like people that are living to equator wouldn't be healthy with having diet from those northern parts. So of course it is kind of individual, but the main common ideas is that less carbs, more fiber, and products that would have all nutrients, macronutrients, obviously proteins, healthy fats. Okay, well, some people will be good with just changing in their diets. Some people would need to take a look deeper how that food that they eat gets processed or gets digested, ingested in their bodies. And this is where gut microbiome comes into the play. And as we have also discussed, it has not only metabolic functionality, but also hormonal and neurological processes are governed by gut microbiome. So for some people, in additionally to their healthy habits, they would have to take care of their microbiome by taking prebiotics and probiotic blends. Some of them would need proteolytic enzymes in order to increase the ability to digest the food that they are consuming. Next, if even this wasn't enough, what are the next levels of manipulation we can do in order to decrease that systemic inflammation? Obviously, there are multiple different types of supplements you can find in order to decrease the inflammation, such as coenzyme Q10 or curcumin. From that list, we would rule out resveratrol, apigenin, camphorol, one of the most potent herbally derived anti-inflammatory remedies. Obviously, stretching is very important for musculoskeletal system, for muscles as well, for healthy muscle function. Next, as we just mentioned, non-physiological loading leads to cartilage destruction, meaning that physiological loading of the cartilage actually has chondroprotection. So loading the cartilage in a healthy way brings the healthy way of its maintenance, which is why endurance conditioning is very important as well. Strength training, sorry, there is no like magic pill. If you need the muscle to be strong, you have to use it, particularly using strength training. But again, okay, we train the muscle, but if there is some kind of anabolic resistance occur, what can we do? For that purpose, we can look into myostatin, which is produced by the muscles, as we saw on the previous slide. It not only controls the osteoclasts that do the bone resorption, but at the same time, they also control the growth of the muscles. And actually, this is protein which is released by myocytes that inhibits muscle cell growth and differentiation. It prevents its kind of protective mechanism for our muscles to overgrow. So, interestingly enough, there is another peptide which is called follistatin, which is also naturally produced in our body. So, this follistatin is able to bind myostatin. And if there is no effect of myostatin on prevention of our muscles from growing, we can actually stimulate the growth of the muscles with just binding that myostatin protein. There are multiple publications advocating for that. And on top of that, if we are binding myostatin, it not only increases our bone of our muscle mass, but it also decreases the osteoclasts activity, which means that the bone resorption process also decreases. Hormones. So growth hormone, insulin, growth factor 1. These are very important for the bone healing and for the muscle maintenance. Those are shown to be very effective in healing bone fractures. And working together with sex hormones, steroid hormones, those growth factor and insulin growth factor 1, growth hormone, insulin growth factor 1, they contribute to anabolism of our muscles. Okay, so steroid hormones or sex hormones, what can we do since there are such processes as menopause, for example? We can stimulate our hormonal system, not replacing or bringing the hormones from external sources like HRT, hormone replacement therapy, but promoting the production of these hormones by our own glands, even though they can be already like old, not as performing not as good. We can stimulate those, but to do that, we have to point out what are those glands, what are those tissues. Again, same as in any kind of regenerative medicine protocol, what tissues are involved in this process, which is compromised, let's say. In the case of steroid hormones, this would be hypothalamus as the center of the brain that collects the information on all the hormone levels of our body. This would be pituitary gland that gets the signals from hypothalamus on the availability of the hormones in our body, and on that information, depending on that information, sends signals to gonads and adrenal glands, tropic hormones. So those glands would produce the hormones that are needed. And of course, liver also takes part in this hormonal system because liver processes many different organs. And in order to do it, so we can regenerate those glands. In this way, we are able to restore functionality of the hormonal system. There are publications, so this one particularly states that synthesis and expression via the stimulation of hypothalamo-hypophyseal adrenal axis with the cell therapy beckons our attention as a biological doctors. And there is a study in this publication about 26 men and 29 women, and these are the results. As you can see, follicle stimulation hormone decreased, all other hormones increased, which is good. There is nothing bad, and actually it should be supplemented with DHA and pregnenolone. About supraspinal properties. So again, the same thing. We are just regenerating the parts of the brain that we aim to regenerate, as we have discussed this whole day long. Vitamin D also been said a lot. So it's not only calcitotrophic substance. It also severely important for cell differentiation for all of our tissues, for functioning, for survival of the cells. So in order to have fast glycolytic twitch fibers, in order to have good equilibrium of osteoblasts and osteoclasts, vitamin D is a must. And then if the inflammation is still not combated, if it's still persisting, like a local inflammation of the joints, for example, yes, we would have to go not systemically but more locally, and for that purpose we can do either periarticular, either intraarticular, local on-site injections. So periarticular, I would recommend using peptides or secretome or exosome, also PRP can be used. Mesenchymal stem cells, but as we have already mentioned many times, you don't really need the mesenchymal stem cell. You can obtain pretty much the same effect with just its exosomes or its secretome. Then for intraarticular injections, can be used steroids, but overall not recommended because on the long term they perform chondrodestructive effect. Hyaluronic acid growth factor, PRP. Now about PRP, it's a very interesting part. So what is PRP? Of course, platelet-rich plasma. What are the benefits? So there are multiple factors that contribute to regeneration of the tissue, decrement of the inflammation, regeneration of the tissue. But some people say it's not so effective. Why so? Because what would you call a PRP? According to American Red Cross, PRP is greater or equal to 5.5 at 10 platelets per 50 milliliters. So it's 2 to 7-fold increase in platelet concentration compared with the whole blood. And the normal human range platelet concentration is from 150,000 to 450,000 platelets. So let's say we have very robust, healthy individual that has 450,000 platelets per milliliter in his blood. So we collect his blood, we concentrate 2 folds of this number. So let's say we have 1 million platelets in 1 milliliter. This is already PRP. We can claim it is PRP. We can use this service as PRP, even though the concentration is quite low. And to be honest, most of the disposable kits that you can obtain, you can find in the market, yes, there are certain limitations to the concentration of platelets you can obtain. But particularly for osteoarthritic conditions, it's been shown that the correct dose is critical for long-term clinical efficacy. And in this particular work, they were using 10 billion platelets in a volume of 8 milliliters. So they had 1.2 billion platelets in 1 milliliter of PRP, which is super, super high concentration. And in order to do that, you have to have a laboratory. In our facilities, me and Dr. Pan, we have tried multiple different protocols with different filters because there are many stages of preparation of this PRP, those platelets themselves, they can be activated, non-activated. Those PRP can be filtered from white blood cells or not filtered. So there is a whole range of different types of PRP you can obtain on top of the concentration. So in our facilities, we could obtain about 1 billion platelets per 1 milliliter, and the efficacy is very, very high. We use those intra-articularly for after the injuries and for osteoarthritic patients. Very, very good results. However, there are some drawbacks. If, for example, the patient is senior and especially if they are using some blood thinners, for example, it is not recommended. First of all, very difficult to obtain PRP. Second of all, not recommended. So the conclusion is, yeah, you have to take a look at the tissues that are involved in the process. You want to regenerate, you want to address the condition, and quite easily you can monitor or refer to the inflammation markers, to the inflammation processes, and also deal with these inflammation processes. You can do that on different levels, starting from the just dietary changes and ending up with some local interventions such as intra-articular, per-articular administration of either peptides, either secretome, either even PRP. Thank you very much for your attention.